I still remember the exact sound of the drawer sliding open because it was such a small sound, and yet it felt louder than thunder in my chest. I was standing right outside my bedroom door, one hand still on the cold metal handle, and from inside I heard my cousin laugh under his breath and say, "What is this?" In that second, the whole world narrowed into one terrifying thought. He found it. Not money, not a secret letter, not some old report card I didn't want anyone to see.
He found the evidence.
The soft pink scarf folded under my winter sweaters. The nude lipstick hidden inside a sock. The silver bracelet I only wore when everyone in the house had gone to sleep. The part of me I protected with locked doors, low lights, and shaking hands. And if you've ever lived with a secret like that, then you already know this feeling isn't just fear. It's heat in your face, weakness in your knees, a racing heart that sounds guilty even when you've done nothing wrong. What nobody tells you is that the hardest part of hiding yourself is not the lying. It's the waiting. Waiting for the day your private world spills into the open because somebody moved one shirt, opened one drawer, asked one question too many. That was the day my waiting ended, and I thought my life was about to break. I had no idea that the evidence found in my room would destroy one version of me, save another, and force me to become someone far braver than the person who had been living in shadows. I didn't rush into the room. That's the strange thing. Movies make it look like you burst in, grab the secret, laugh it off, invent a story.
Real fear slows you down.
I stood there for half a second too long. Long enough to hear him open the box I had hidden behind my old textbooks, long enough to hear tissue paper crinkle, long enough to imagine exactly what he was seeing. The wig cap, the little compact mirror, the pair of earrings I bought from a market 3 towns away because I was terrified someone local would recognize me. Then I stepped inside, forcing myself to look normal, forcing my breathing to stay steady, and he turned toward me with that half-curious, half-amused expression people wear when they think they've found something harmless. He held up the scarf. "Bro," he said, "whose is this?" That one question almost ended me. Because there are moments when truth and lie stand in front of you at the same time, and you know whichever one you choose will cost you something. I laughed, badly. I said maybe it belonged to my sister, and somehow ended up here. I reached for it too quickly. He didn't let go right away. His eyes flicked from the scarf to my face, then to the half-open drawer, then back to me. He smiled, but not in a cruel way. That almost made it worse. Cruelty I could fight. Kind curiosity was unbearable. "Your sister doesn't wear this color," he said. And that was the first crack in the wall I had built around myself. I wish I could say this story begins with confidence, with me understanding exactly who I was from the start, but it began with confusion and loneliness and tiny stolen moments. It began when I was younger, standing in a room after everyone had left, seeing a piece of clothing draped over a chair, and feeling a pull I couldn't explain. Not lust. Not a joke. Not a dare. A pull. A quiet need. I wanted to know what softness felt like when it belonged to me. I wanted to understand why some fabrics, colors, shapes, and movements spoke to a part of me I couldn't describe out loud. The first time I tried anything on, my hands shook so badly, I could hardly button it. I kept listening for footsteps. I kept checking the door. But when I looked in the mirror, something inside me went still. Not complete. Not magical. Just still. Like a noise I had lived with for years had finally lowered enough for me to hear my own thoughts. That stillness became addictive. Not because I was becoming someone fake, but because I was meeting a truth I had never been allowed to approach in daylight. The problem with discovering something that matters deeply to you is that if the world feels unsafe, joy turns secretive very fast. I became careful in ways that would probably look ridiculous to anyone else. I learned which floorboards in the hallway creaked. I learned which family members knocked, and which ones never did. I learned how to fold things so they looked like ordinary laundry from a distance. I learned to shop with cash. I learned to throw away receipts before reaching home. I learned that fear can turn you into an expert organizer. Every item had a hiding place. Every hiding place had a backup. I had one small bag tucked inside an old-school backpack no one touched because it looked too boring to contain anything interesting. Inside that bag were the earliest pieces of me. Cheap tights, a plain top, a soft cardigan, a drugstore lipstick, a pair of clip-on earrings, and later, when I had enough courage, a beginner wig. To someone else, it was a random collection of objects. To me, it was a private language. And because I know some people watching or listening to stories like mine aren't just here for the emotion, they're here because they're learning too, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me early. Don't chase perfection before comfort. I wasted months thinking I had to transform completely or not try at all. I thought if I couldn't look flawless, there was no point. That mindset will kill your confidence before it has a chance to grow. The first lesson that changed everything for me was simple. Start with what makes you feel calm. Sometimes that's just one soft piece of clothing. Sometimes it's painting your nails clear instead of bright. Sometimes it's learning. Posture before makeup, skincare before contour, comfort before spectacle. The mirror becomes much kinder when you stop demanding instant transformation and start allowing gradual discovery. I didn't know that at first. I thought every attempt had to be dramatic. So whenever my eyeliner came out uneven or my wig looked strange or my shoulders felt too stiff, I would panic and feel foolish. But identity doesn't bloom under panic. It blooms under patience. My cousin didn't know any of that when he stood in my room, holding my scarf. He just knew he had found something that didn't fit the version of me everyone believed in. I took the scarf from him and shut the drawer, trying to act offended, like he had crossed a line by going through my things. He raised both hands and laughed. "Relax," he said. "I was just looking for the charger." Then he glanced at the drawer again. "You sure that's your sister's?" The room went tight around me. I could feel my own pulse in my teeth. I nodded. He studied me for 1 second too long, then shrugged and changed the subject. That should have been relief. It wasn't, because suspicion, once born, doesn't just disappear. It lingers in the air like smoke. You smell it even after the fire is out. The rest of that day, I moved like a person whose house had nearly been robbed. I smiled at dinner, answered questions, checked my room 3 times, relocated half my hidden things, and slept badly. Every little sound in the night felt like someone opening a cupboard. Every voice in the morning sounded like an accusation waiting to happen. The next week was even worse because nothing happened. Nobody confronted me. Nobody mentioned the scarf. Nobody acted different enough to confirm what my fear kept inventing. And if you've ever hidden a secret, you know silence can be more exhausting than exposure. I started reading meaning into everything. If my aunt looked at me too long, I thought she knew. If my cousin smirked at his phone, I thought he had told someone. If my sister knocked before entering, I wondered whether it was out of respect or suspicion. My nervousness became sloppy. I almost wore tinted lip balm to breakfast by accident. I left a fashion tab open on my phone. I washed one of my hidden tops late at night and nearly forgot to bring it back in before sunrise. Fear had made me careful for years, but now fear was making me reckless. That was the second turning point, though I didn't know it then. The discovery of the evidence didn't expose me immediately, but it pushed me into a state where I was more likely to expose myself. One evening, while pretending to study, I did something I had never done before. I opened my front-facing camera and looked at myself for a long time without trying to change anything. No filter, no soft angle, no costume, no borrowed softness.
Just me.
Tired, scared, ordinary. And I asked myself a question I had been avoiding for years. What exactly am I so terrified of? Being laughed at? Yes. Being rejected? Absolutely. Being called names? Of course. But underneath all of that was an uglier fear. I was terrified that if my secret came out, people would define me before I had the words to define myself. They would reduce my private self-discovery to one ugly label, one joke, one family whisper. They wouldn't see the tenderness of it. They wouldn't see the relief, the curiosity, the care. They wouldn't know how long it took me to stop feeling ashamed each time I looked in the mirror. They would only see the evidence and write their own story. That realization hit me hard because it meant I wasn't just hiding clothes. I was hiding authorship over my own life. So, I did what scared people do when they're desperate for control. I made a plan. I reorganized everything. I bought a lockbox online and had it delivered to a pickup point instead of my home. I made a rule that nothing stayed loose in drawers anymore. I created a simple routine for makeup practice, so I wasn't always rushing and making a mess. Cleanser first, moisturizer second, primer only if needed, light base instead of caking everything on, blend down the neck. Don't fight your features, work with them. I learned the power of eyebrows, the softness of neutral tones, the difference between wearing a wig and styling a wig, and the miracle of choosing clothing cuts that flatter your shape instead of punishing it. That was one of the biggest lessons for me and maybe one of the most valuable for anyone learning. Don't buy clothes because they look good on mannequins or influencers. Buy clothes that work with your proportions and your comfort level. A simple neckline, a cardigan that breaks the shoulder line, darker colors where you want less attention, lighter tones where you want softness, fabrics that drape rather than cling. The moment I stopped trying to copy and started trying to understand, my confidence improved.
Not
Instantly, but noticeably. That confidence lasted exactly 4 days. Because on the 4th night, I came home earlier than expected and found my sister sitting on my bed. At first, nothing seemed wrong. She was scrolling through her phone, kicking one leg idly, looking casual. Then I saw it. The lockbox was on the desk. Closed but moved. Not where I had left it. A current of ice ran through me. She looked up, saw my face, and her expression changed immediately. Not shocked. Not amused. Careful. Can we talk? She asked. There are few sentences more dangerous than that when you're carrying a secret. My first instinct was to deny everything before she even spoke. Instead, I shut the door. She patted the bed beside her. I didn't sit. She looked at the lockbox, then at me again and said, I wasn't trying to invade your privacy. I was looking for my charger. And before you say anything, yes, I know everyone is always looking for chargers in everyone else's rooms, and yes, it's annoying. But the box fell when I moved your bag.
My mouth went dry.
Did you open it?
I asked.
She hesitated just long enough to answer me even before speaking. No, she said, but I think I know what's inside. That was the 3rd turning point. Not because she knew, but because she wasn't angry. People think exposure is one moment. It's usually a series of tiny moments where the truth leaves hiding in pieces. My sister didn't push. She didn't demand. She just sat there and let the silence breathe. Finally, she said very softly, You don't have to explain anything you don't want to explain. I just need you to know that if this is what I think it is, I'm not your enemy. It's embarrassing to admit how close I came to crying at that sentence. Not because everything was solved, but because when you've been braced for impact for so long, gentleness can feel unreal. I sat down. I kept my eyes on the floor. I said, I don't even know how to explain it. She nodded. Then don't explain it perfectly. Another sentence that changed me. Because secrecy convinces you that unless you can present your truth in polished, flawless language, you shouldn't say anything at all. But human beings rarely arrive at truth polished. We arrive shaking,
stumbling,
incomplete. So I told her the simplest truth I had. I said that sometimes dressing that way made me feel more like myself, or maybe more honest with myself, and that I didn't fully understand every part of it yet, but I knew it wasn't a joke and it wasn't hurting anyone, and it mattered deeply to me. I expected questions like knives. Instead, she asked practical things. Are you safe? Has anyone else seen? Do you need help? I couldn't believe it. I had spent years imagining that if anyone ever found out, the conversation would become a trial. But with her it became something else. Not easy. Not magical. Just human. She told me my cousin had mentioned finding something weird in my room but hadn't told the family because he wasn't sure what he had seen and mostly seemed curious. My stomach dropped. So the suspicion was real. The evidence had traveled beyond the drawer. I wasn't imagining it. Yet my sister had heard it and come to me first. That saved me in more ways than she knew. She also said something that became one of the best lessons in my journey. She said, if you're going to do this, stop doing it like a thief in your own life. I stared at her. She laughed a little and clarified. I don't mean announce it to the whole world tomorrow. I mean stop treating yourself like you're doing something disgusting every time you want to be yourself. That sentence stayed in my bones. Because shame affects technique as much as emotion. When you rush because you think your very existence is wrong, your makeup gets messy, your styling gets chaotic, your posture shrinks, your whole energy becomes apology. But when you allow yourself dignity, even in private, everything improves. The way you sit, the way you choose colors, the way you handle mistakes, the way you breathe. Shame makes you clumsy. Self-respect makes you graceful long before your look becomes polished. My sister became my first safe witness, and that changed everything. She didn't transform overnight into some glamorous mentor from a makeover show. She was annoyingly honest, occasionally brutal, and far too amused by how bad I was at eyeliner. But she helped me in ways no tutorial ever could. She showed me how to match foundation undertones by testing along the jaw instead of the hand. She explained why overpowdering was making me look flat. She helped me choose a wig that framed my face instead of swallowing it. She taught me that confidence is visible from behind before anyone sees your face, through posture, pace, tension in the shoulders, the way your hands move. She made me practice walking across the room not like a performance, but like a person. Relax your upper body, she said. Stop marching like you're going into battle. We laughed, but she was right. I had been turning femininity into an exam instead of an experience. Once she helped me soften the process, I started enjoying it more. That was the fourth turning point. For the first time, my private world became shared, and instead of becoming smaller under scrutiny, it became more real. Weeks passed. My cousin never brought it up again, but I knew the risk still hovered over me. My sister encouraged me not to let fear own the whole story. At some point, she said, your life can't just be hiding and almost getting caught. She was right. Secrets freeze time. You stop living and start managing risk. So one evening, after many rehearsals and outfit changes and nervous pacing, I left the house dressed as the version of myself I had only ever met indoors. Nothing extravagant. A soft knit top, dark jeans, a light scarf, subtle makeup, simple earrings, a medium-length wig, flats that wouldn't kill my feet or my confidence. My sister came with me, partly for support and partly because she said if I panicked and ran, someone had to drag me back to my senses. We went to a quiet neighborhood a few miles away where nobody knew us. When I stepped out of the car, my knees nearly quit on me. Every passing headlight felt like judgment. Every distant laugh sounded personal. My sister linked her arm through mine and said, "Walk like you belong to the ground under you." That first outing was not cinematic. Nobody gasped. Nobody pointed. Nobody stopped the street and made me the center of a dramatic social lesson. Most people did what most people usually do. They lived their own lives. A woman walked by while checking her phone. A delivery driver carried boxes into a shop. Two teenagers argued about something completely unrelated to me. That was the fifth turning point, and maybe one of the most healing truths I ever learned. The world is often less obsessed with us than our fear is. I'm not saying danger doesn't exist. I'm not saying everyone is kind. I'm saying fear enlarges the audience in your head. It makes you think every eye is on you when, in reality, many people barely notice. And if they do notice, it doesn't always mean disaster. I had built entire nightmares around public exposure, but that night I mostly encountered ordinary life. We sat at a small cafe with outdoor seating. My hands trembled so badly around the cup that I thought I'd spill tea all over myself. My sister pretended not to notice. Then the barista came over and asked if we needed sugar. That's it. A normal question. Normal tone. Normal smile. But I can't explain how huge that felt to me. Because when you've been hidden for so long, ordinary treatment feels revolutionary. Not worship. Not spectacle. Just ordinary human interaction. I answered in a voice quieter than usual, and the barista nodded and moved on. I nearly cried into my tea. All that fear, all those years, and the first person I dealt with outside didn't hand me shame. They handed me sugar packets. Sometimes healing enters your life disguised as something very small. But relief has a dangerous side. After your first successful step, overconfidence can sneak in dressed like freedom. A few days later, I tried going out alone. Same city area.
Different outfit.
This time I thought I was ready because the first experience hadn't ended in disaster. I did my makeup a little faster, chose a bolder lipstick, wore a longer coat, and took a rideshare to a shopping strip. For 20 minutes, I felt almost invincible. I browsed accessories, tried on a bracelet, even caught my reflection in a store window and didn't immediately look away. Then I heard a voice behind me say my name. Not the name I used in my private world. My real name. Sharp. Familiar. My blood froze. I turned and saw an old-school friend standing 3 steps away, eyes wide with recognition and confusion, trying to wrestle each other into meaning. That was the 6th turning point, and it hit like a car crash. Because being seen by strangers is one thing. Being recognized by someone from your former life is completely different. It felt like 2 universes had collided in public. He stared. I stared. My brain searched for exits, lies, amnesia, teleportation, anything. Then something incredible happened. He looked away first. Not out of disgust. Out of awkward mercy. He stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Hey," he said. "You okay?" I could barely answer. He glanced around, then said, "Don't worry. I'm not here to make your life difficult." I nodded mutely. He asked if I wanted him to leave. I nodded again. And he did.
Just like that.
No scene. No cruelty. No phone camera. No laughter. Just one difficult, humane moment handled gently. I went home shaking anyway. Kindness doesn't always prevent fear. Sometimes it only gives you space to feel it safely. I locked my door, took off everything, wiped my makeup with hands that wouldn't stop trembling, and sat on the floor. My sister found me there an hour later. When I told her what happened, she sat beside me and said, "Well, now you know the next lesson." I looked at her, exhausted. "What lesson?" She leaned back against the bed and said, "Visibility is not the same as danger, but visibility always asks a price. You need plans. You need boundaries. You need to know what you'll say if someone recognizes you. Confidence is not just looking good. Confidence is being mentally prepared." She was right again. So I started practicing not just appearance but response. What would I say if someone asked directly? What would I say if someone mocked me? What would I do if I felt unsafe? Which places were worth the risk, and which weren't? I learned something a lot of people ignore when they focus only on style. Safety is part of presentation. Know your area. Keep your phone charged. Tell someone where you are if you're going alone. Choose shoes you can actually walk in. Carry minimal valuables. Be careful with secluded places. Confidence without caution is not freedom, it's gambling. Once I accepted that, I stopped confusing recklessness with bravery. Around that time, my cousin returned for another family visit, and I could feel the unfinished tension waiting between us like a coiled wire. He was casual, loud, always around other people, which somehow made private confrontation impossible. But I caught him glancing at me more than once, like he was still trying to solve a puzzle. Then one night, while everyone else watched TV in the lounge, he knocked on my bedroom door and stepped in before I fully answered. My stomach dropped. He leaned against the wall and said, "I need to ask you something." His tone wasn't mocking. That made it scarier. I said nothing. He looked at the shelves, the desk, the window, anywhere but directly at me, and then said, "The thing I found before, was it yours?" The room became weightless and unbearable at the same time. This was it. The 7th turning point. Not discovery of an object this time, but a demand for ownership. I had imagined this moment 100 ways, all of them dramatic. But when it arrived, I was just tired. Tired of lying badly. Tired of hearing my own fears speak before I did. So instead of building another fake story, I asked him, "If I say yes, what happens next?" He looked surprised. Then he exhaled and said something I will never forget. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just wanted to hear the truth from you, not from a drawer." That line cut straight through me, because for all my fear, he had a point. Objects can be discovered. Truth has to be offered. We stood there in a silence full of years. Then I said yes. Just one word. Yes. He frowned, not in disgust but in effort, like he was rearranging his understanding of me in real time. He asked if it meant I wanted to become someone else. I said no, not exactly. He asked if anyone forced me into it. I almost laughed from relief and frustration at once. I told him no. I told him it was personal, private, important, and not something I had figured out in perfect language. I told him I wasn't trying to embarrass the family or create drama or trick anyone. I was just trying to understand myself without being torn apart for it. He listened. Actually listened. Then he said, "I won't pretend I fully get it. But I'm not going to expose you." That was more grace than I had expected. He did add awkwardly, "Just maybe hide things better next time." We both laughed, and the sound felt like a rope breaking. After that, something subtle changed in me. Not because the whole world knew. Most of it still didn't. But because two people had now seen the truth and chosen not to weaponize it. That matters. The mind learns from evidence. For years mine had only collected evidence that exposure would destroy me. Now it had new evidence. Some people can surprise you. Some people respond like human beings rather than judges. Some secrets become survivable the moment they're shared with the right person. That was the 8th turning point. My fear did not disappear, but it lost its absolute authority. Then life, being life, decided that emotional progress wasn't enough chaos and added a new problem. I found an envelope under my door. No stamp. No name on the front. Just plain white paper folded around a single handwritten note inside. It said, "I know more than you think. We need to talk." My vision blurred for a second. My first thought was blackmail. My second thought was family disaster. My third thought was how quickly a room can start feeling hostile when paper enters it with the wrong message. I checked the hallway. Empty. I asked my sister if she'd seen anyone. She hadn't. I asked my cousin. He swore it wasn't him. The note felt like poison in my pocket all day. Every person in the house became a suspect. Every conversation felt staged. Every kindness felt like cover. By evening I had spiraled into such a state that I was ready to pack my things and vanish into a motel for 2 nights just to breathe. Instead, my sister forced me to slow down. "Look at the handwriting," she said. I compared it to a birthday card pinned to the notice board in the kitchen. Same slant. Same heavy pressure on the downstrokes. My heart stumbled. The note wasn't from an enemy. It was from my mother. That was the 9th turning point, and nothing could have prepared me for it. I didn't sleep much that night. Every possible version of the next day attacked me in rotation. Anger.
Tears.
Disappointment. Questions. Religious guilt. Family reputation speeches. The old script society rights for these conversations played nonstop in my head. The next morning my mother asked me to help her with groceries in the afternoon. Normal tone. Deadly calm. When we got into the car, she didn't start the engine right away. She kept both hands on the wheel and said, "I found something while cleaning near your room a few weeks ago, and I've been waiting for you to come to me." I couldn't breathe properly.
She turned to look at me.
"You didn't come, so now I am here." Her voice wasn't loud. Somehow that was worse. I stared ahead. She asked, "Is there something you want to tell me?" I wanted to become heir. I wanted time to split and carry me somewhere else. But all those months, all those half-escapes, all those almost conversations had led here. So I told her. Not beautifully, not fully, just honestly enough. I said I had been hiding clothes and makeup. I said it mattered to me in a way that wasn't casual or silly. I said I knew she might not understand. I said I had been afraid. I said I was still figuring things out. I said I wasn't doing it to mock anyone. I said I hated lying but didn't know how to stop without losing the people I loved. When I finished, the car was so quiet I could hear someone mowing a lawn 3 houses away. My mother looked down at her lap for a long time. Then she asked the question I least expected. "How long have you been afraid of me?" That broke me more than anger would have. Because buried under all my fear of judgment was a truth I didn't want to face. I had already convicted some people in my heart before giving them a chance to respond. Not for no reason. Fear comes from real social danger, real stories, real consequences, but still, I had imagined my mother as only a wall, never a person. Tears came before I could stop them. I said I didn't know. She nodded slowly. Then she told me that she didn't understand everything, and maybe wouldn't quickly, but she did understand what fear looked like in her own child, and she was hurt that I had carried it alone. That doesn't mean the conversation turned into instant perfect acceptance. It didn't. She had questions. Some clumsy, some painful, some shaped by a world very different from mine. But she stayed in the car. She stayed in the conversation. She stayed. And sometimes staying is the first miracle. Over the next few weeks, our home became a place of strange, uneven honesty. Not everyone knew every detail. Not every conversation went well. Some days my mother asked thoughtful questions about what I felt. Other days she retreated into silence, clearly overwhelmed. My sister remained my anchor. My cousin kept a respectful distance, but dropped the tension. Once, in a completely ordinary moment, my mother left a skincare product outside my room with no note. I stared at it for a full minute before picking it up. That tiny gesture almost undid me. Because love doesn't always arrive with speeches. Sometimes it arrives as unscented moisturizer placed quietly at your door by someone trying, awkwardly, to understand you. But just when I thought the crisis arc of my life might finally be settling, the internet entered the story. A local event page posted photos from a community market I had visited weeks earlier during one of my outings. I wasn't front and center, but I was there in the background of one photo, half-turned, recognizable enough to anyone who knew me well. My sister saw it first and rushed into my room with her phone. The 10th turning point. Digital evidence. Public, searchable, shareable, unstoppable. My chest went hollow. Has anyone else seen this? I asked.
She didn't know.
Panic returned with a sophistication it hadn't had before. A drawer secret can be denied. A public image cannot be unfound. We spent an hour refreshing comments, searching shares, checking whether any relatives followed the page. I felt sick. My whole body remembered the old terror, but bigger now because screens multiply exposure faster than gossip ever could. That night, I made a choice that changed the rest of my story. Instead of sitting in dread, I posted first. Not a full life manifesto. Not a dramatic announcement. Just a controlled message to a limited circle on my private account where some old friends and acquaintances followed me. I wrote that if anyone had seen a recent photo and felt confused, yes, it was me. Yes, there was more to my self-expression than people had known. No, it wasn't a joke. And no, I wasn't interested in debates from people who only wanted to be cruel. I wrote that I was still learning, still private in many ways, but done with living entirely on fear's terms. My finger hovered over the post button so long it might as well have been a cliff edge. Then I pressed it. The moment after posting, the room didn't explode. No sirens. No cosmic punishment. Just the ordinary silence that follows a life-changing act until responses begin. And when they did begin, they taught me one of the hardest truths of all. Once you step into visibility, you don't get one reaction. You get many. Some warm. Some confused. Some silent. A few ugly. An old classmate sent a message saying she admired my courage. Someone else unfollowed without a word. One friend wrote a paragraph so supportive I had to read it twice. Another sent an ignorant joke and got blocked before finishing the second sentence. Freedom is not tidy. It does not sort the world into heroes and villains for your convenience. It simply lets reality arrive. That was the 11th turning point. I stopped measuring success by universal approval and started measuring it by alignment. Could I live with myself? Could I protect my peace? Could I build community where respect existed and stop begging for it where it didn't? Something unexpected happened after that post. Messages began coming from people I never would have guessed. Quiet people, private people, people with carefully ordinary public lives and hidden inner worlds. One said they had been stealing moments in mirrors for years and thought they were broken. One asked how I learned makeup without getting caught. Another asked how I handled the fear of family. A fourth simply wrote, "Thank you." That word hit differently than all the others. Thank you. It made me realize my story was no longer just about being found out. It had become useful. The very evidence I once thought would ruin me had turned into proof for someone else that they were not alone. That did not make everything easy, but it made it meaningful. So, I began sharing carefully. Not every detail, not every wound, but enough truth to matter. I made videos and voice notes under controlled privacy. I talked about practical things people never explain kindly. How to start small if you're terrified, how to choose one feature to soften instead of attacking your whole face with product, why lighting changes everything, why skincare matters more than most beginners think, how neutral tones can teach you more than bright colors at first, why buying 3 cheaper outfits you actually wear is better than buying one fantasy outfit that lives in a bag because it overwhelms you. I talked about shaving and timing and the way a rushed routine creates frustration. I talked about using photos to study your angles instead of relying only on the mirror. I talked about voice pressure, not just pitch, because many beginners strain upward when what often helps more is relaxing tension and adjusting resonance gradually and safely. I talked about emotional aftercare too, which no one had taught me. The crash after dressing up can be real. The vulnerability after feeling seen can be intense. Plan for that tenderness. Don't only prepare for transformation, prepare for the quiet after it. The more I shared, the more I realized confidence isn't a single breakthrough. It's a collection of recoveries. Recovering after being almost caught. Recovering after a bad makeup day. Recovering after someone reacts badly. Recovering after you look in the mirror and don't like what you see. Recovering after you compare yourself unfairly to people whose journey is completely different. Recovering after joy makes you feel guilty because you were taught joy like this should shame you. Recovery is the real skill. Anyone can feel beautiful for 10 minutes under the right light. The deeper work is learning how not to collapse when the light changes. Months after the first scarf was found, my room no longer looked like a crime scene waiting to happen. It looked lived in. Not fully open, not performatively secret, just lived in.
Something still stayed private.
Some items were still tucked away, because not every space deserves access to every truth. But I no longer moved like a fugitive in my own life. My mother and I developed a cautious rhythm of honesty. My sister became the person I sent mirror selfies to when I needed blunt feedback. My cousin became weirdly protective in his own clumsy way, once interrupting a relative who made a mocking comment about men who dress weird by saying, "You should mind your own business. People carry more than you know." I nearly dropped my fork at the dinner table. And then came the 12th turning point, the one that changed the meaning of everything that happened before. It was a rainy evening. The power had flickered twice. My mother was sorting old family photos in the lounge, and she called me over to help. We sat on the floor with albums spread around us, half the room lit by a warm lamp because the overhead light had started acting up. I flipped through page after page of birthdays, school uniforms, weddings, relatives I barely remembered. Then one photo slipped loose from between 2 pages. My mother picked it up first. I saw her expression change.
She handed it to me.
It was me. I couldn't have been older than 6. I was standing in the courtyard, wearing one of my cousin's sparkly play scarves around my shoulders like a shawl, one hand on my hip, grinning shamelessly at the camera. Completely unafraid. Completely unhidden.
I stared at it, stunned.
My mother watched me carefully and said, almost in a whisper, "You always had this softness in you."
We all saw pieces of it.
Maybe not clearly, maybe not correctly, but it was never born in that room. It was there long before the evidence. I looked at the photo again and felt something in me break open in the gentlest way. All this time I had treated my hidden things as the beginning of the story, the proof of a secret life. But she was right. The scarf in the drawer, the lipstick in the sock, the wig in the box, those were not the origin. They were only artifacts. Evidence doesn't create truth. It only points toward what was already there. That realization rewrote my whole life in a single evening. Because if the truth existed before the hiding, then my secret self wasn't an invention. It was a continuation, a thread, a language I had been speaking in fragments long before I knew its grammar. And if that's true, then shame loses some of its power. Shame thrives on the idea that you manufactured your difference out of weakness, confusion, deviance, or failure. But what if your truth has roots? What if it kept surviving quietly through years of silence because it belonged to you too deeply to die? What if the evidence in your room is not proof that something went wrong with you, but proof that something real kept trying to live? I took that photo to my room and set it on the desk beside the compact mirror that once felt incriminating. I sat there for a long time, looking from one reflection to another, the child in the photo and the person I had become. For the first time, I didn't feel like they were strangers. I felt continuity. I felt grief for how frightened I had been. I felt pride for surviving it. I felt tenderness for every version of me that had tried to make space in a life that didn't always know where to put me. And I made myself a promise. I would never again describe my journey only in terms of being caught. I was not merely someone whose evidence was found. I was someone who finally stopped mistaking evidence for shame. So, if you're listening to me now and you're still in that stage where every hidden item feels dangerous, every mirror moment feels temporary, every knock on the door feels like the end, I need you to hear me clearly. Be smart. Be safe. Hide what you must until you can stand on stronger ground. Safety matters. Privacy matters. But don't let secrecy become the language you use to describe your worth. You are not dirty because you are hidden. You are not fake because you are learning. You are not ridiculous because you care deeply about how certain fabrics, gestures, silhouettes, or reflections make you feel. Start where you are. Learn patiently. Respect your own pace. Build skill without cruelty. Build beauty without panic. Build confidence without pretending fear doesn't exist. And please remember that no outfit, no wig, no makeup look, no passing standard, no stranger's approval can give you what self-respect gives you in private. The world may validate or reject a version of your presentation on any given day. But the real foundation is the way you treat yourself when nobody is clapping and nobody is watching. I learned that in pieces. In a drawer opened at the wrong time. In a sister's steady voice. In a cousin's awkward honesty. In a mother's painful attempt to understand. In a barista handing me sugar like I belong there. In a school friend choosing decency over spectacle. In a public photo I could not control. In messages from strangers carrying the same fear I once thought was uniquely mine. And finally, in an old photograph of a child who had not yet learned to be ashamed of softness. That child taught me something the adult version of me had forgotten. Before the world teaches you to hide, your truth often reaches for joy very naturally. Now, when I open my room, I don't see evidence of something disgraceful. I see evidence of growth. The first cheap lipstick that taught me how much blending matters. The scarf that nearly ended my peace and accidentally began my freedom. The cardigan that helped me understand shape and drape. The notes my sister wrote with product names and shade suggestions. The skincare bottle my mother left outside my door without explanation. The bracelet my cousin bought me months later in the most hilariously indirect peace offering of all time, leaving it on my desk and pretending he had no idea how it got there. The photo of 6-year-old me, grinning under a sparkly scarf, still the strongest proof in the room. And if there's one final truth I want to leave with you, it's this. Sometimes the thing you're most afraid someone will find is the very thing that teaches you how to stop disappearing. Sometimes the evidence in your room is not the beginning of your ruin. Sometimes it is the first witness to your becoming. I thought that drawer opening would expose me as a fraud. Instead, it exposed how long I had been starving for honesty. I thought being seen would end my control. Instead, it forced me to finally claim authorship over my own life. I thought the story was about getting away with a secret.
It was never about that.
It was about learning that I deserved to exist with dignity long before I looked perfect, long before everyone understood, long before I stopped being afraid. So yes, someone found the evidence in my room. They found the scarf. They found the makeup. They found the pieces I had hidden with trembling hands. But what they really found was a life trying to breathe. And once the truth hit air, it never fit back into that drawer again. If you're still hiding, I won't insult you by pretending courage is easy. It isn't. Some days courage looks like going outside. Some days it looks like washing off your makeup and trying again next week. Some days it looks like telling one safe person. Some days it looks like blocking someone who does not deserve access to your softness. Some days it looks like learning your shade correctly after 5 wrong purchases and laughing instead of spiraling. Some days it looks like standing in front of the mirror and refusing to call yourself shameful. That counts too. That counts a lot. And if you've made it this far with me, then maybe you needed this story for more than entertainment. Maybe you needed proof. Proof that fear can be loud and still not win. Proof that being discovered is not always the same as being destroyed. Proof that learning takes time and awkwardness and terrible eyeliner and moments of panic and tiny brave decisions that nobody else sees. Proof that your softness is not automatically a weakness. Proof that even if your room is full of things you're not ready to explain, that doesn't make your life a lie. It makes your life unfinished. And unfinished stories are not failures. They are stories still choosing their ending. Mine didn't end when the drawer opened. It began.